Okay, guys, so let's talk about whether you should buy Boeing stock before earnings. So, a lot of people are talking about Boeing stock right now. The stock has been absolutely crushed due to not just the coronavirus pandemic, but they had the Boeing 737 MAX crisis last year, and that was devastating for Boeing's revenue in 2019. So, it just looks like it's been a really tough, basically, I would say the last year to 18 months for Boeing in general. So if we can just take a look at the annual chart here, we can see that the stock is down a ton. So it was around a high of over the last 52 weeks of around $381, and the stock has lost. I'll give you guys an exact percentage. The stock has lost about 65% over the last 52 weeks. So a lot of people are kind of wondering whether Boeing is a stock that you can pick up during earnings. So we're going to talk a bit about this in this video. So I have a lot of interesting things to share with you guys and my take on whether Boeing is a good buy heading into earnings on April 29th, guys. So Boeing will report earnings on Wednesday, April 29th, and I think we're going to see some major things happen with the stock. So let's get right into it, guys. So there is a really interesting article that talks about the Boeing 730 MAX bailout, and basically it's saying, even without, the whole coronavirus situation, Boeing was already in a tough situation. But now with the whole coronavirus situation, basically Boeing is going to really need that $60 billion bailout from the government. So it says the target is to figure out where the $60 billion that Boeing requested for the aerospace manufacturing industry would fit in. And as you can see here, he basically goes into the costs and all of the losses that Boeing has incurred due to these two issues. So if we take a look here, kind of adding everything up together. He says in total that would leave Boeing with a shortage of at least 2.4 billion. Now that's basically all of the costs that they've incurred, the cash flow loss, interest expenses, and all these things like that. That Boeing is going to need a ton of money to basically recover. So he says, so Boeing really depends on a combination of borrowing money and strong delivery volumes. So the current arrangements and previous plans for 2020 are barely sufficient for Boeing, and that is after it fully uses delayed draw term loan, the credit facility, and cash it has on hand. So basically, Boeing is, in the short term, Boeing is in a lot of trouble. So as you can see here, he said, in this report, I looked at whether we could connect the plan Boeing had for the year for the $660 billion request, which will give us an indication whether Boeing's request is driven by 737 MAX delays. So the whole 737 MAX situation, if you guys aren't familiar with it, basically in 2019, the 737 planes were basically dropping out of the sky. So Boeing had to basically ground most of these planes, and it had a devastating effect on their revenue. So as you guys can see here, we're on Yahoo Finance. We'll take a look at Boeing's revenue. So Boeing did about 100 billion in revenue in 2018, and due to the whole 737 crisis, their revenue fell off a cliff, guys. And if you take a look at this over like quarterly, and take a look at the quarterly numbers, we can see that revenue has been on a decline. So you see 19 billion and 17 billion in the latest quarter. So we should expect another decline due to the whole coronavirus pandemic, because a lot of Boeing's business is basically deliveries to airline companies like Delta and United Airlines and stuff like that. And if you guys have ever flown, internationally or even domestically, chances are you were on a Boeing aircraft. So let's talk a little bit about some of the worst. So let's talk about the worst possible scenario for Boeing stock. So here's a really interesting article I found on Forbes. It says without a bailout deal, with a bailout deal all but ruled out, Boeing stock could potentially fall to $60. So this is obviously one of the scariest things that investors could imagine. With Boeing stock collapsing that hard, the stock already fell to about $100, and then there was a lot of buyers that came into the stock. So if I can show you guys that price chart. That was one of the times where I actually mentioned that Boeing stock was really interesting. So as you can see here, for that kind of that panic dip where the stocks were really selling off, Boeing basically had a lot of support at $100, but this article says that it could even fall below 60. So I just want to basically sum up why. So it says the coronavirus pandemic has hurt demand for the slew of products and services globally, including air travel. As the commercial airplane segment contributes 42% of Boeing's revenue, the reduction in capital expenditures planned by major U.S. carriers were significantly trimmed the company's order backlog. So that's really bad news because Boeing and these airline companies are interconnected, and if these airline companies aren't basically ordering aircrafts, Boeing's revenue is going to take a massive hit. So it talks a little bit about the aircraft when they grounded the 737 MAX. Boeing's commercial aircraft deliveries took a hit from 806 airplanes to 380. So that's where you guys saw that major drop in revenue from Boeing, and basically the stock hasn't recovered since then. So now they have to basically bake in more cancellations from airlines. So it says, due to order cancellation from airline carriers, investors could revise their expectation for Boeing's turn revenue further downwards by 25% to 58.7 billion. So that literally Boeing has lost half of its revenue projected from 2018 until 2020. So that is going to obviously have a massive, massive drop in Boeing's stock price. So according to their calculations, if the revenue continues to come down in 2020, they have Boeing at around a stock price of $60. So basically, they got to this number basically on reducing Boeing's revenue by basically around from 76 billion down to around they said to around 58 billion, as you can see here. So then they would use a price to sales ratio of about 1, and their stock target price on Boeing is $60. So guys, obviously I think that $60 seems like a bit low for Boeing stock, but you know, this earnings report isn't going to be good. Boeing has been struggling basically over the last about, I would say, about year and a half or so. So should you buy the stock after earnings, well, guys? Well, here's my take on Boeing stock opinion. I'm waiting to get back in at around $100 or so. I think this earnings report is not going to be positive. So, we're already seeing some support levels here, but it looks like Boeing could break through those levels. So let's just take a look at the 1-month chart. So as you can see here, there's already been buyers come into the stock at around $120, but we've been on a downward trend from the $160 level, and this stock has slowly been trending down. So in this situation, is Boeing stock a buy before earnings? For me, no. I think Boeing stock is going to go lower. If I were to enter a position, I would definitely wait for earnings because I think the earnings is going to be bad, just like many of these other airline companies posted bad earnings. For example, Delta, United Airlines, most of these guys had 80 to 90% reduction in revenue. So since Boeing is so tightly bounded to the airline industry, we're going to expect another massive drop in revenue. And with the not really sure whether Boeing is going to get some of that $60 billion for the aerospace industry, this stock is probably going to trade lower. So for me right now, Boeing is a sale. If they don't get the bailout money, they're going to be in huge trouble, and this stock could go a lot lower. But me, I'm going to be watching this stock very closely because I think long term there is a lot of potential for Boeing stocks. When I say long term, I'm basically talking about 2022, 2023. In my estimations, it's going to take perhaps 1 to 2 years for basically the coronavirus situation to be past us, and for the news to replace what's going on, because right now that's all that people are talking about on the news network. So this type of information where everyone's focused on what's going on is very bad for stocks that are tied to the airline industry. So for me right now, I'm not buying Boeing stock. I'm going to wait until it hits around $100. I think that people bought it up too fast, not really realizing that the company has been in trouble for basically over about a year and a half now. So it's not just the coronavirus situation, it's the 737. So it's a double whammy for Boeing stock. So there's a couple of ways you can play this heading into earnings. Obviously, some of you guys are going to be interested in buying some put options or shorting the stock. But for me, I'm just going to simply play the waiting game and wait for Boeing stock to go down because I think that Boeing is going to head a lot lower. But the interesting thing is that Boeing and Tesla both are reporting earnings on the same day. It was a coincidence. So for me, I'm probably going to be trying to buy Tesla stock, and for Boeing, it's a sell for me right now. I just can't get involved in Boeing. I think the only chance you would to hold the stock would be if you're thinking long term on this. But I could be wrong, guys. Let me know what you think in the comments. And if you enjoyed this video, please smash the red subscribe button to receive more videos on Boeing and other stocks tied to the airline industry. I actually, as a personal disclosure, I actually own Delta Airline stock, so I'm going to be covering, obviously, these airline stocks like Boeing, United, Southwest, and Delta in the future because I read your comments and you guys want me to talk about these stocks, so I make my videos for you. So I hope you enjoy them. So that's it for now, guys. Until next time, take care.